This is how you handle a coaching search. Chris Klieman retires, and we're all caught off guard because, wait, just because they didn't have the season they were hoping for, he's leaving? He's only 58. What do you mean he's 8 years older than Lane Kiffin? What are you talking about? Oh, look at that. Collin Klein will be the next head coach in Manhattan. Christian Rauh, Locked On Wildcats, here to discuss. Well, that was fast. I mean, boy, that was like an old Geico commercial. So easy a caveman could do it, you know? Like, it was just, whew, that was it. Penn State fans have to look at what Kansas State just did and be thinking to themselves, how'd you do that? How did you do that?
Yeah, following this one in the second segment, talking about how Penn State's having the longest coaching search ever, and then Kansas State has what might be historically the quickest coaching search ever in this new NIL transfer portal world. This is exciting for Kansas State. Obviously, Chris Klieman, what he's done for the program for over the last 7 years has been very good as well. 6-6, not the best year. Of course, the last couple of games, you could start to see there's a little bit of exhaustion happening with Chris Klieman. He put out in the official statement that there's multiple reasons why he's stepping away. He mentioned his personal health. He mentioned he wanted to spend more time with his family. And then our athletic director, Gene Taylor, mentioned that the reason that he's stepping away is because of this new world of NIL and rev sharing, that nobody is following the rules, and he's sick of it. Sounds kind of familiar. We've heard this with other legendary coaches in the past.
You mean like Mike Gundy? I mean, little different context, but same energy of I don't want to deal with this sort of stuff. So does that make you think that at Kansas State, they're behind other schools in the Big 12? I don't think you have the depth of heavy hitters financially in the Big 12 as you do in some other conferences. You think about the Big 10, you've got Ohio State, and you've got Michigan who can give big money, and you've got Oregon, and Penn State and you've got USC. You go down, and in the Big 12, it's very clear right now to me who those two schools are. It's Texas Tech and BYU. And what do you know? Those schools are playing the Big 12 championship game later this weekend. So is Kansas State just feeling like they're a second tier NIL transfer portal caliber sort of program? And that's part of the reason Chris Klieman's going, with all the other factors, I don't feel like I can get to that level.
The narrative was kind of leading that way last couple of weeks, and you'd hear from Chris Klieman in his press conference. He would talk about how money is the only reason why teams are succeeding right now, and until we get some sort of grasp and control,
which I do not agree with, by the way, but continue.
I'm with you. I think that there's a lot more to it, but there's been a lot of cop-outs and a lot of excuses happening with Kansas State this year, dare I say. And I know that's probably not the best way to say it, but they've been talking about injuries being the reason why you've lost football games. And then they turn into the fact, well, we haven't spent enough money. Some of it is to light a fire under the donors. And obviously bringing back a guy like Collin Klein should do that. He has to do anything he possibly can to get the donors, because there's not oil guys coming out of the woodwork in Kansas State to make that happen. There's not cookie company CEOs coming out of Kansas State, other than other Big 12 schools that are doing right now. You have to find a way to get these donors to step up. And with a legacy guy like Collin Klein, who has a great reputation at Kansas State, Heisman Trophy runner-up, was an offensive coordinator for Kansas State during that Big 12 championship run. When he was the offensive coordinator, they were top 25 offenses in the country both years. So there's a lot of really good things to look forward to. And I think there was just some exhaustion on the Chris Klieman side.
How do you think they got this done with Collin Klein so quickly, who, as you mentioned, up-and-coming offensive mind, the production, he's an alum. I feel kind of old, honestly. I remember very vividly watching him play against Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl back in that 2012 season, and all of a sudden he's the head coach of a Power 4 program, and this was so unexpected, but it happened so fast. And that's what makes the Penn State debacle so much more puzzling. That Penn State is a much bigger and better football brand than Kansas State. Not that Kansas State's a bad one, but Penn State is much bigger in that regard, is a much more attractive job. They play in a better conference, got more money, and they're getting this done quickly. And Michigan State is in the same league as Penn State, and they turned around, boom, Pat Fitzgerald, right as Jonathan Smith is shown the door and had his key card privileges revoked. I just continue to be befuddled at how Penn State can't find a coach, and that they could wind up hiring the interim. Like that's insane. But I want to therefore give credit to Kansas State where it's obviously due, because, well, I guess it's not as easy as it always looks. And this There was no rumors, speculation. You had nothing to talk about on your show for days at a time. Seiko is probably mentally exhausted with all this stuff. He's just going, man, could they just make a hire? You were like, all right, I get to cover a coach. Oh, it's over already, huh? Wow, that was quick.
It was very quick. I think there was a tweet and then there was a quote tweet 5 minutes later saying that, hey, by the way, this is the replacement. And don't get me wrong, it's the perfect candidate. It's the one that should be the guy, the A+ hire. It's not settling for anything. It's the right guy for the job in Collin Klein to fit the shoes. Chris Klieman had some big shoes to fill, replacing Bill Snyder. And I think he did a really dang good job doing it. He's going to be seen as the second best coach in Kansas State football history. That's not a bad thing to sit on the podium in second place for. Bill Snyder is one of the greatest coaches of all time. And I think he's done a great job being seen as the second best, and not just for wins, for what he's done with the program. He's brought it into this new era of NIL, transfer portal, all that stuff. And I think he's done it with some sort of progression and some sort of momentum, although it started to stall this year. Maybe you blame Dublin. Maybe you blame Avery Johnson's parents fighting in the parking lot, Dylan Edwards leaving the program. I don't know. There's a lot of things you could point your finger at to why exhaustion happened with Chris Klieman. But with Collin Klein this year, I think it's a perfect opportunity for him to go back to these donors. As we mentioned, that's going to be the biggest thing for them to take that next step forward when you're trying to battle those BYUs and Texas Techs and other major schools inside college football. And get them back on board. I think some of them fell off over the last couple of years, especially this season. You bring in a guy like Collin Klein, and they might come crawling back very fast.
Avery Johnson's still got 1 year of eligibility left, correct?
He does, and guess who recruited him?
Collin Klein.
Yeah.
Does anybody benefit more from this hire potentially than Avery Johnson? Because his potential is immense. I think everybody's aware of that. The production, though, wasn't where it needed to be this season, wasn't where folks like myself thought it would be. Kansas State finishes with 6 wins. I thought they would have 10. I thought this would be an opportunity for Avery Johnson in the same offensive system with some solid returning pieces on the perimeter and what should have been one of the best run games in the Big 12. I thought this was maybe a dark horse Heisman sort of season. But now with Collin Klein there, boy, I don't think Collin Klein has to adjust his system or his play sheet. He's just got to get there, handle the administrative duties, and implement his offense and say, I'm going from Marcel Reed to Avery Johnson. They might look different because one is 5'11 and one is 6'12", it feels like. And yes, I'm aware that's how many inches are in a foot. Mm-hmm. I think that their skill set is so similar that it's just copy-paste.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that this is, you're right. I think the person that benefits the most off it, to get your answer, yes, is Avery Johnson. I think it also is Avery Johnson because he's going to return. I think there's a really good shot that he will not enter the transfer portal, but also the surrounding pieces around him will also return. That was a huge question that I had over this beginning of the week, because again, we had no hearing, no rumblings of this happening. So just days before, 2 days before, I talked about how I felt there was no momentum in this program right now, where last year you had this type of narrative where you could at least say, we at least started 7-1 last year. Yeah, the season ended badly, but we at least can prove that we have what it takes to be a Big 12 contender. You didn't have that this year with the loss in Dublin against Iowa State, with the loss to Army, with almost a loss to an FCS school. You would have had nothing to hang your hat on with Chris Klieman this offseason, going into trying to keep these players out of the portal. And Avery Johnson, Jace Brown, Lincoln Cure, Austin Romaine. You would have to really push hard. Now that you bring Collin Klein in, a guy who is a quarterback genius, a guy who is fantastic on the offensive side. We've seen what he's doing at Texas A&M. He proved he can do it in the Big 12 as well just a few years ago with some of these players that are still on this roster, Avery Johnson included, although he wasn't the starter at the time. There's just a lot of really good things to look forward to. And I think, dare I say, that you could, if the retention happens for Kansas State, you could put them right back in the picture of being a Big 12 contender again in 2026.
I don't think that's crazy whatsoever. You got to keep probably all but one of those guys at least, if not all of them. But man, if you do, maybe you bring a couple of reserves that are capable of playing for you from Texas A&M. There's a lot of talent on that Texas A&M roster. Some of it's going to go with them, right? It's just a matter of who and what can those guys be. Christian Rauh, Locked On Kansas State, is always great with the most opposite coaching search. I've never seen a greater separation of styles for the same task in college football. But here we are. That's where we are. We're also coming up on the Big Ten championship game. Jacob Goins and I get you ready for that.